On this part of the investigation into the knocking sound from the primary drive gearbox stroke engine of this Norton Commando Mk2A, I have been round and checked all the nuts and bolts, make sure we're tight, inspected the various parts, can't see anything particularly bad. So my next part of this investigation is to reassemble everything and see if it's still doing it. So to that end, yep, I still have the spacer behind the clutch. The clutch basket looks to be fine. I've inspected everything, but just looking again. And then I actually measured the clutch stack. When I first put it in, I measured it at 31.2 millimeters. I've measured it since and it's at 29.8 millimeters. So it's settled in a little bit. Looking online, they suggest a stack of 1.17 inches, which equates to 29.2 millimeters. So I believe that we're well within the spec, and certainly the clutch worked very nicely on the limited trials that I did. To put the clutch in, you start off with a steel. This one I believe is 4 millimeters. They say that you can use down to 3 millimeter thickness on the first one in the back of the clutch, but not a 2 millimeter one, which all the rest are. And it has a boss on it that runs on the clutch springs. Okay. For the next stage, I think I'm going to have to get down level with it and feed the circlet in bit by bit. I haven't slackened or any of the compression off the spring, so hopefully this part will fit straight in. I think I might need some extra light on it, and as I say, get down level with it. On the clutch center, I have fitted the tab washer and bent the pieces up. Makes it easier to actually fold them over. I'm going to use some blue Loctite as recommended by one of my subscribers, and do the torque up on this to 40 foot-pound. I should do the same on the rotor as well. So the clutch push rod is actually in there, and I have put a little bit of assembly lube on the oil seal that actually stops the gearbox oil contaminating the clutch. So we'll then line this up and I've actually got the brake lever to hold the back wheel and the gearbox is in gear, so that I can tighten this up. I have set the torque wrench to 40 foot-pounds, and I'll tighten this up. Oh. There we go. Beat. Yeah, 41.4. That was I can clean that up, and then I'm going to bend the tabs over, making sure that that one is stuck in the hole. I have turned up a spacer to go behind the alternator rotor and cut a key slot in it for the key on the crankshaft, so that should fit into there and allows the key to actually fully sit home. There's no reason to have this driven, but it doesn't hurt, and of course it saves trying to make the key shorter. You want a really strong connection between the crankshaft and the rotor, which is quite a big heavy lump. Before I actually put the rotor on and bolt it up though, I want to actually put the clutch together so that I final check. The clutch center nut is done up, the push rod is in there, the tap washer is all bent up and sealed, so I believe that I can now put this part on. You'll note that the tensioner bolt actually sticks out, although there is a hollow to accommodate the clutch push rod. With the belt in place and the pulley, engine pulley in place, I can now try kicking over the engine to see if that noise is still there or not. I have some ideas of what to do, so we'll do that first. While investigating the clunking sound coming from the Norton Commando, one of the things that raised my suspicion was when the engine pulley came off the taper on the crankshaft without actually even needing the extractor or anything like that. So this is the pulley that was on there with a spacer and the pulley with its taper, and there are some witness marks which are probably difficult to see on the keyway, which suggests that this was actually making the noise, potentially. And when I actually tried kicking the engine over with the rotor removed, this came straight off of the taper with a very similar clunking sound. I decided that I would actually buy a new pulley that doesn't have any compromise on the keyway, hopefully to fix this problem. To that end, when I ordered the pulley, it is a little different. This pulley actually has a requirement for the spacer, whereas the new pulley actually has the spacer effectively built in. The new pulley is slightly taller, and that's down to the keep, the belt keeper that's on the engine side. The new one, very similar, except for the requirement not to have a taper, and the fact that the center boss is slightly thinner. The key fits, and I actually bought a couple of keys, one from RGM Norton, RGM Norton, which obviously goes with this pulley, and then one from Andover Norton, which is made to drawing, and they are both the same size, so there's very little issue with that. The one of the things I think was going on with this original setup was that the belt guide, which sits onto the crankshaft and actually keeps the belt on the pulley, was not fully home onto the spacer. There is potential for the pressure applied to the taper through the rotor to be applied not in the center, because it's not actually a solid block of metal all the way through, but to the edge of the pulley through this effectively slimmed down belt guide, and obviously the fact that these spokes are not solid. So on the new pulley we could potentially have the same issue. So I have got a selection of spacers, shims. These ones are the specified thicker ones. I actually have some thinner ones as well that will ensure that the center of the belt guide pushes hard against the boss of the pulley and actually applies full force to the taper, and that will hopefully ensure that the pulley is actually pushed hard onto the crankshaft. The other thing that I've been doing is lapping the pulley onto the crankshaft and then using engineer's blue to actually see how much coverage I've got. Once this is all assembled, and I'm going to assemble it dry, I will see how much pressure is applied to the to that taper, and with the aluminium spacer allowing me to pull the rotor off, I can tighten everything up and look to see then if I actually need the extractor to pull this off the taper. All being well, it will be on there firmly, and as I say, I'm going to use some Loctite to ensure that we actually get a very tight fit onto the crankshaft, and with new keys, all being well, that will work as expected. Using the fine end of the valve grinding paste, I will smear a small amount of paste on the inside of the pulley. And then fit the pulley onto the crankshaft, and then I'm using a cloth because the ends of the ribs of the pulley are quite sharp, and with the grinding action, of course, it gets tighter. Well, that is harder to turn. the inside of the pulley looks quite consistent, the same colour. Not any particular scores on there. And the same on the end of the crankshaft. It's getting quite hard to turn, so we'll clean it all off and use some engineer's blue. Let's see how we're doing. So we're using engineer's blue. Wonderful stuff, gets everywhere. And we will put a thin smear, and it wants to be thin, inside the pulley. So we have the engineer's blue in there. We make that on. Okay. It's become a little more money, easier to turn, and let's have a look, see. So there are some gaps, and the usual requirement is, I believe, 80% coverage, and we'll see how we're doing. There's a gap at the back there, which perhaps about 70–80% coverage there, just that bit at the back there. So now we're going to add some engineer's blue to the taper at the end of the crankshaft. everywhere. And look to see how much coverage we've got on the end of the on the inside taper of the pulley. And that's pretty good. Again, there's a little bit just there. Not sure you can see that, but it is all the way around. Having lapped in the pulley, I want to perform what's called a tap test, i.e. hitting something with a hammer. Now, I'm not going to put the key in at this point, it's going to be the next step, but I do have a piece of tube and I hit the other end of the tube, which should hopefully seat the pulley. I have fitted the belt. It was encouraging because I had to use the extractor to pull that pulley off. So that seemed to imply that the taper is pretty good. Let's perform the tap test again this time. I'll just hit it once. Done that quite tight. Let's kick the engine over, no spark plugs in. That's definitely turning the engine over. Let's fit some spark plugs. Nope, still making the same sound. While I haven't found a reason why when I tried kick-starting the Norton with the spark plugs in, I get this clunking sound. It does appear to be centered around the engine crankshaft pulley and that area. I can't actually see why. I sort of made sure that the engine pulley fits onto the crankshaft really tightly and everything is tightened up, but it's still doing it. I tightened up the belt a little. You should be able to get it through 90 degrees, although it should be loose enough. They recommend an inch of up and down movement before you actually start trying to stretch the belt or pull the bearings and things. I thought to myself, well, maybe it's something to do with the end float. When I built the engine, I aimed for 1/7 of end float and used shims to achieve that, but maybe something somewhere got missed or I made a mistake somewhere. So I've been trying to devise a way to measure the end float. I can take the primary the timing cover off, off the other side, but initially my thought was to put a dial gauge on the end of the alternator rotor and then move the whole shaft out as far as I could this way and then push it or tap it back in to see if I can measure the end float that way. Initially I thought I could mount a magnetic base for the dial gauge to fit onto the bottom of the barrels, and that's reasonably rigid, but not rigid enough to actually measure between 4 and 15 thou there. So I looked at other ways of trying to clamp it or whatever, and my latest idea, which I haven't tried yet but I'm going to, is to fit a shaft out from the primary chain case spigot, sticking out this way, and then the dial gauge arm will go across. To that end, because you want to be a little bit further out than this is a 3/8 excuse me, UNF bolt stud. So I made a spacer, aluminium, and then I've turned the shaft with the threaded end, which goes onto there, and it screws on tightly. I need some way to tighten it up. So that's now tight, and it's very, very strong. I then have the dial gauge set up to get that parallel as possible. So, one of the things I found when using the magnetic vase is that when I actually, it's still doing it. What's moving there? Making sure that everything is now tight. When I actually bounce the dial gauge probe against the front of the rotor, it always comes back to 0. So that's a particularly good sign, and it suggests that everything is going to be repeatable. Yeah, so we will now pull the crankshaft this way towards me, and then try pushing it back in. Interestingly, it doesn't appear that the crankshaft is actually moving. I've tried even tapping it, with a shaft and quite a big heavy hammer, and the dial gauge comes back to the same point every time. So the implication is that there is no end float. The next step is to take the the timing cover off and see if I can move the crankshaft from the other end. Having dismantled the outer and inner gearbox covers, I have been looking to try to understand why I've still got the knocking sound coming from the clutch or bottom of the engine or whatever. But one thing I have noticed, although the clunk is still there when I reassemble the kickstart, the belt has become incredibly tight. Now, I'm sure that is probably a clue. So the next thing, of course, is to move the gearbox forward to slacken the belt and try to find out whether I've actually got parallel gearbox shaft and crankshaft, and whether the clunk goes away when I've actually moved the gearbox. Maybe during this process I might find something, but that will be in, I think, the next video.